Hey, and welcome to I Was Just Thinking. My name is Heather Deveaux, and I was just thinking about values and how we use values to help us make better decisions, and how I have been getting clearer on what I value and what is important to me as I continue my work in my creative sabbatical. And it's not that these things, it's not like a news flash for me. Obviously, I am aware of things that I like and don't like, and I'm aware of the way that I filter information for the most part, but some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about in this podcast has come about because of my experience in the creative sabbatical. And some of it has come about out of necessity, really. And so I want to talk about this idea of values, and specifically values around making decisions or decision-making values. So, you want to give it a coined term, decision-making values. There we go. But before we get into that, I want to call out the elephant in the room that is this podcast, because I spent some time on the weekend listening to the sound of my own voice, as I would, but I haven't actually done it yet, as I have released, this is now episode 5 of I Was Just Thinking, and I kind of never got around to listening to the episodes playback on Spotify and Apple, and I don't know why I didn't do that, but I just started doing it this weekend, and I gotta tell you, I was fucking horrified. Like, wanted to crawl into a hole and die. And of course, the irony was that the last episode that I had recorded was about how we don't need to be perfect, how done is maybe sometimes better than perfect. And I did use the example of this podcast when I had said that you can't done is better than perfect your way through some things in life, but you can in others. And this podcast was a great example of done is better than perfect, except, was it, it felt like it was barely done. I was like, what is that fucking sound coming out of my car speakers? I thought, oh my God, it must be the car. And then I got home and I played it on my phone, and I was like, oh no, it's just like the playback. I don't know. Anyway, it's been so long since I have recorded podcasts on any size or shape or with any intention. It's been 3 years. And I guess I had forgotten that when you're editing your podcast, not I guess, I'm trying to soften the blow here for myself. I absolutely forgot that there are certain features and functions of the software that I use to make the recording sound better. And so when I said I'm just doing some light editing and putting these things out in the world, I wasn't fucking kidding. I just didn't know that it was going to sound so bad. So I'm hopeful. I've done some testing. I've actually moved my microphone and repositioned it and turned it right side up and turned it so that the front of the microphone is actually facing me, which turned out to be the main culprit that I hadn't even realized. I've been recording podcasts for years, and I didn't realize that I had the setting of the microphone on one-sided, like mono. And I'm just over here 12 feet away from the microphone because my voice is so loud that I thought that was going to work, and it didn't. And then there was some settings in the software. So I'm not here to make apology because whatever, it's not going to be perfect. But I did want to acknowledge that, if you're sitting there going, why does she sound like that? First of all, I sound like that, and I didn't do a good job of editing you guys. So, my bad. And let's move on. Let's talk about values. Let's talk about what we're here to talk about today. So, I'm going to reference a blog that I had written a while back. I'm going to say 2 months now. It's called The Essential Core Values That I Use to Make Better Decisions. And I wrote this blog after thinking about how I had come to the decision to actually engage in this creative sabbatical. So if you're just joining us, I have decided to take a year off from my consulting business. I'm an instructional designer, curriculum developer. I've run my own consulting business / course creation business / coaching business / training business for fucking eons. It's been literally a decade now. And this year I had decided that I'm going to actually take a year off and I'm going to engage in a creative sabbatical. And you were listening to some of the byproduct of this creative sabbatical, which of course is I Was Just Thinking. And I had written this blog because I was just actually thinking about how I landed on this decision and how I got here. And I started thinking about safe holds or thresholds and how I was using my value system, which I had to, pull the string on the sweater a little bit to get real clear on what those things were. I was thinking about those values and I was thinking about them in terms of thresholds, which I thought was really interesting. Not to like pat myself on the back, but I do tend to take a different perspective on a lot of things that we take for granted, especially when you're talking about something like potentially as cliched as values, because it is something, and I say cliche with all the love of my heart, because it is something that people just throw around but don't always understand or use properly or even implement in some degree. They just think like, oh, I like this, therefore that is a value, and that's not a value. And when I think about values, I think about the things that drive me to live the life that I'm living, that help me make decisions to live the life that I want to live. And the way that I define value is that it is something that underlies or supports or is the foundation of something else that I'm doing. So how I started thinking about values in terms of like, how did I identify my values? I started looking at things that were really triggering to me and trying to figure out why they were triggering to me. And I discovered that it's because they actually were going against this set of rules, this set of thresholds that I had for myself. And of course, with a little digging and some introspection, realized that the reason I get triggered is because this piece of information or this action or this person or this system or whatever is pushing against my values. And so I came up with this blog post, which I am actually talking about values, but I am talking about values from the perspective of thresholds, because part of this creative sabbatical and part of the last few years of my life, the work that I've been doing is really trying to get away from this idea of the bare minimum. And the idea of the bare minimum to me is, if I'm having a really shitty day and I have not gotten dressed, like I'm still in my pajamas and I'm laying on the couch and I'm watching Netflix, like that's a bare minimum day for me. And I actually fucking hate those days. Like, I'm going to talk to you about what that looks like for me and how that drains the energy out of me. But when I have a day like that, it reminds me that like I have a standard of living for myself that only I have for myself. It's not based on other people's information or input. This is a standard of living I have created for myself. And it is actually, I have created it because I want to live that way. I do not want to spend my time on the couch in my pajamas watching Netflix. So when I have days like that, it reminds me really too much of bare minimum and how I don't want to be wasting my life laying on the couch watching Netflix. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I binge Netflix as much as the next person. I'm not judging. I'm just saying I hold myself to a different standard of how I want to use my hours and my days, my weeks and my months. And a day on the couch in my pajamas once in a while is fine. But the reason I get triggered by that is because one of my values is to get as much out of my life as possible. And I'm going to talk about this and tell you the names of these, but just as an example, before we get into this, that is something that I feel very triggered by. So when I'm sitting on the couch watching TV alone or with someone else, to me, it feels like this is just not how I want to live my life. This is the bare minimum of feeling like I'm living a good life. And it has nothing to do with being productive at all, because I could just as easily be sitting on the couch reading a book. That's not productive. That's just a different form of entertainment. But my values, these core values that I have, or these thresholds, which I'm going to refer to them from here on out as thresholds, because I think that makes sense. And it is a different way that I look at values. These thresholds that I have for myself help me to identify, oh, I don't like this because this is the bare minimum, or I don't like this because this doesn't actually help me live the life that I want, or I don't like this because it doesn't feel right in my body. And all that information is what helps me to make better decisions. Now, do I always make better decisions? No, sometimes I have iced coffee and 4 cheeseburgers for dinner. That's not a great decision, but it is a decision, and that is what's called bare minimum. And those days don't happen often, but sometimes they do, and that is okay. So let's get into this so that we can start thinking about what our values or thresholds are. I want to talk about this in terms of this creative sabbatical, just to give it some context, but you can think about this in terms of your business, your job, your family, your friends, your hobbies, whatever that is. I want you to think of something that you hold to a standard, and I want you to think about why you have that standard. Now, this isn't therapy. I'm not saying it's because you're a control freak or because you are afraid of letting go or because you need to protect something. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking strictly in the context of making decisions about something that you deem important with systems or lenses that are also important. And so when I think of values or thresholds, I actually think of it as an operating system, which we have to say, and we have to acknowledge, operating systems in this analogy, and most analogies with operating systems, is that they update. They need to be updated. They get to change. Sometimes they get a hard reset, and sometimes they get wiped clean, and you have to build the operating system again. Okay, now that is a really great analogy for what we're talking about here. Your values, your thresholds are an operating system that just because they're true for you today does not mean that it has to be true for you tomorrow. And it might not have been true for you yesterday, and that is okay because these are not carved in stone. All right? The thresholds, the values, how you make your decisions. Just because you did it like that yesterday doesn't mean you have to do it like that today. These things are not carved in stone. This is a way of operating in the world that you get to decide, which means you also get to change it if you want to. Okay, so let's talk about this creative sabbatical as the context here. So one of the things that I did when I decided to engage in this creative sabbatical was I had to come up with some number, like a financial threshold, a money threshold, if you will. I had to come up with some number that would tell me or trigger me when it was time to think about going back to work or getting a job or starting a new business or reopening my old business or whatever comes next for that, okay? However, I'm going to make money in the future. Right now, I am not actively making money because I'm engaging in this creative sabbatical. But the reason that my brain went to money first is, number one, I'm a single mom. Number two, I own a home that is mortgaged, which means I got to have that money at the end of the month. Number three, I work for myself. And so those three things, I mean, mostly that I work for myself, is that I have a ton of responsibility myself to create money in my life, to raise my child and pay for my home so my kid has a place to live. I mean, I could probably live out of the back of my car pretty happily. Like, I wouldn't see that as a failure, but I don't think my kid would like that. So he's more of a, I like my stuff just so and clean. And I'm more of a, I can wait another day to have a shower kind of person. But when I thought about doing this creative sabbatical, I had mentioned in a previous episode that I had some money in the bank from my business, and I used that money to bankroll this sabbatical. Now, I'm not stupid, and I'm also not frugal. So I looked at this money in the bank. I'm not even going to pretend to be frugal. I looked at this money in the bank and I did the math. Like, literally, if I want to take 12 months off, how much money is that going to give me every single month? And I still want to travel, and I still want to renovate my home, and I still want to be able to buy the things I want to buy, and I still have to be able to pay my bills. Oh, and my son is going to university next year, and that's going to cost money. So I looked at this budget that I had, which was a healthy budget for a year. I had all of the money all at once, and I looked at it and I said, okay, cool. The reason that I needed to come up with a money threshold was because, as I mentioned, I'm a single mom, I own my own home, and I run a business. And because of the nature of running a business and the way that money comes into my business and goes out of my business, you need to make sure there's a certain amount of money always in your bank account. And so this seems like something that I created right now, but I've actually been living like this for a really long time, where I have to have a certain amount of money either on its way to me or in my bank account in order to feel like I'm not stressed out all the time. And the reason that that's important is because if I'm stressed out, you know what I do? I make shitty fucking decisions. I make rash decisions. I make uninformed decisions. I make decisions from scarcity. But if I got cash in the bank, or I've invoiced a client and I know that money is on the way, and I have set my business up so that I haven't been not paid in a very long time. That is like early business problem, and I'm 10 years into this shit, and it's been a long time since a client has stiffed me. And so when I send an invoice, I know that money is, for the most part, and always has been for the last several years, it comes no problem. So as long as I've sent the invoice and I know that that money is on the way, I can live very comfortably without, scarcity mindset, or without fear, or without feeling like scrambling, or I have to sell something really quickly to make money. Now, this was challenged. This part of my life, my financial life, was challenged last fall. So like this time last year, I did experience a downturn in the cash flow of my business. And I do talk about that in the podcast in previous episodes. So if you're listening in order, you would have come across that story already. But I'll just reiterate here quickly that I had $300,000 worth of contracts just go bust at the same time, all at the same time. And it left me honestly scrambling. And so when that happened, I had come up with this system for myself for 2025. Before I decided to do the creative sabbatical, I come up with this system that I called Stability, Freedom, Growth. And really, that's just a way of allocating my cash. And what I had thought to myself was, for every dollar that comes into my business from now on, 70% of it is going towards my life, so my needs, which means I'm drawing 70% of my profit right off the top for myself. Talk to an accountant about it. I don't care. That's how I'm doing it. I pull 70% of my cash. So for every dollar, I take 70 cents for myself, my family, my son, my house, my bills, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'll pay taxes on it. Cool. But like, that's what I'm taking. Then I take 20%, so 20 cents, and I put it towards my debt. And I just want to give an update here. I paid off all my debt this year. On top of not working, I just paid off my credit card and I paid off my tax bill. And now I just have a small little loan for a trailer that I've owned for 1,000 fucking years. And if you know anything about owning recreational vehicles, you know I will die and I will still have that loan. But I am selling the trailer. So that will be gone soon enough. But all my other debt, except for my house and my car, are gone, which means I don't have consumer debt anymore. And so I did that using this stability, freedom, and growth plan. So 70%, 70 cents on the dollar is going towards my life, 20 cents on the dollar is going towards paying off my debt, and 10 cents on the dollar, or 10% of my income, is going towards my future bank. So that's savings, that's trips, that's whatever. Okay. So I'm not really worrying about retirement right now. I am actually engaging actively in a form of retirement, and I am not having that conversation here right now. I'm talking about the here and now. So I had this money threshold that I had already put in place for myself based on a negative experience that I had. I got new information. The operating system had to change, and so I changed it. But I was already living with a money threshold, with a value towards money or of money in my life, that money comes to me easily. I make money easily. These are all things I believe and I value and I work towards. And so I don't have a fear of spending money, even though there is only so much money in the bank right now because I'm not actively earning an income, which like I know sounds fucking bonkers, but like try it. Just like live on the money you have. Give it a try, see what happens. But I knew that I could do this. And I knew that because of my background and the way that I have built my business and the way that I pay my bills and the way that I save my money and the way that I spend my money, that I was going to be fine. And I was not going to have to worry about, anything. Even if something major happened, I have insurance, I have savings, I have warranties. A hot water tank is $1,300. Like, it's not going to break me. It'll be fine. But I did put in place a way to trigger my decision making around this, was when I got to $20,000 left in the bank. $20,000 from where I started, $20,000, however long the money lasts in the bank, is my trigger, is my threshold for, all right, now I've got to decide. Am I going back to my business? Am I going to get a job? Am I going to create a partnership? Am I going to buy a dry cleaners? Am I going to start a coaching business? Am I going to write books for the rest of my life? Am I going to work really, really hard and stretch this 20,000 and see if I can actually get more time out of this? That is the threshold. So $20,000, that is the value that I carry around money. If my bank account gets to $20,000 this year, I have to stop and I have to think, okay, what am I doing to bring money in the door now? And I am perfectly comfortable with like, I'm gonna sell stuff on Facebook, or I will sell some art, or I will do some service work or whatever, because I haven't made a decision yet. So I'm not worried about the decision. And this is where the operating system comes in. I don't have to know what decision I'm going to make. I just have to know when it's time to make the decision. So that's the first one, the money threshold. Okay. So what this does is it creates freedom and flexibility, and I don't have pressure. One of the reasons why I think we end up living subpar lives, and that's not a judgment, that's like a self-assessment. Like I have often thought to myself, I could live a better life if. So if you think that to yourself, also not a judgment, don't judge yourself for it, just pay attention to why you think that. If you could live a better life, what would you need? And it almost always will center around money, because money buys back your time. Money creates freedom. Money allows you to not worry. Money does buy happiness, and fuck anyone who thinks it doesn't. You're spending it wrong if you're like, I'm rich and I'm fucking miserable. Okay, you're spending it wrong. I can have very little money and be very happy, and I can have lots of money and be very happy because I use my money the way I want to use it. So when we think about the value here, okay, so I'm using the threshold as the trigger and treating it like a part of my operating system, my values operating system. But really the value to me is I value freedom and flexibility. In order to have freedom and flexibility in my life, I have to have money. I don't have to have millions of dollars, but I got to have some cash in the bank. And that is where the money threshold has come from. The next one that I want to talk about, the next value system that I have, my operating system includes, is what I call the hell yes threshold. And I'm going to start this section by saying that I am a people pleaser. I'm not even going to say I'm like a recovering people pleaser. Sometimes I do refer to myself as a recovering people pleaser. I would love to be a recovered, like past tense people pleaser, but like it's such is life. So in the moments when I am being a people pleaser, and I know that's kind of hard to imagine sometimes, but if I am being a people pleaser, that means to me that I am giving somebody something that they need at the expense of myself. Okay, so whether that is my mental health, whether that is my resources, whether that is my literal money, whether that is help in some form, if I don't feel good doing it, it's probably because I feel obligated to do it. And there's nothing that makes me crazier than obligation. Like externally imparted obligation makes me crazy. So if something comes up for me and I have to make a decision, over the last few years, I've been like actively practicing just like saying no. And sometimes I'll walk it back because like that's life. But I will at least go through the motions of like, no, I don't think so. No, I don't think that's something I want to do. Like I will voice it out loud like that because I'm practicing, right? We don't go from people pleaser to non-people pleaser overnight. There are things that we have to work on within ourselves to get from a hell yes to a fuck no. And that is a framework that I am working on and that I am operating in right now, is that when I feel like my standards are starting to slip, so this bare minimum that I talked about, if I start to feel like I'm backing myself into the bare minimum, or I think other people are not bringing their A game to the table when it needs to be the A game, like if we're playing the game right now, everyone needs to be on. If I feel like that's not happening and then I'm picking up a lot of the slack, that is when I will start to exercise my right to say no. And I do have a right to say no. So do you. So we're not going to get into all the nonsense around that, but just know that that is true. And we don't have to explain ourselves when we want to say no to people. And sometimes it is difficult. It can feel difficult. It can feel uncomfortable, but we have to practice it, because one of the things that helps us get away from that bare minimum, that minimum standard, is moving from, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can go and watch the kids on Saturday. Like, I don't want to do that, but like, okay, you need me to do it, so I will go do it. and we talk ourselves into doing it and we get really resentful. One of the ways to go from that, okay, sure, is to look for the hell yeses. And if it's not hell yes, it's a fuck no. And so I'm trying to live in this place of not feeling like I'm working backwards and not feeling like I'm letting other people rule my life, or not feeling like I'm being put in the corner, like babies in the corner, not feeling like that so that other people can feel comfortable. So I pay attention to things like how I feel in my body, if my anxiety is ratcheting up around somebody needing something from me, if I feel obligated, and that's a big thing for me, I can recognize very quickly when I feel like, fuck, I should do this. So paying attention to those words and those feelings and those actions, and really looking for where are the opportunities for me to make easy yeses in my life. So I'm going to give you a very specific example of when it's a fuck no for me. And that is, I have this problem with being a passenger in a car. Now, I recognize it is not always feasible or realistic for me to be the driver, like literal driving a car all the time. But if I have to be a passenger, I am no longer apologizing for the anxiety I'm going to have about your maybe even fantastic driving. You could be a great driver. I don't care. I have a lot of anxiety about being a passenger. And the reason is because when I was 18, I was hit by a bus in a car as a passenger with somebody who had bald tires and no car insurance. And it took me a long time to get over that accident. But even longer, I was 18 and I'm 43 now. And I still, when I'm in a passenger seat of somebody's car and a fucking bus is coming towards me, I like grab the car handle and pull my seatbelt a little bit, because what happened to me in that accident was I was thrown from one side of the car to the other and landed on the ground because the car was ripped in half. I was on the ground, I had become unconscious, and my seatbelt had torn in the process of that. So I was like thrown around the car even though I was wearing my seatbelt. The car was very old. It was very shitty. Long story. But that has haunted me to the point where like I am a hyper driver. I'm a very good driver. I've never myself been in an accident because I pay attention on the road. And this is not a judgment. I don't care if you're a shitty driver. This is a concrete example of how certain things in my life have to be a certain way for me to feel comfortable. And I'm not making apology for that. How do I get in a car with someone and not make apology? I just tell them, please, can you slow down? This is making me feel uncomfortable. And then they have the decision. Do they want to abide? Does the dude want to abide? Are they going to slow down? Is it a no problem for them? Is that making them uncomfortable? They have to figure that out for themselves. We all have to figure this out for ourselves. But for me, if I got to be your passenger, buddy, fucking look out, because I'm not going to make it easy. You're probably going to offer to just let me drive. So we should probably just start there. Hell yes for me is I'll drive. Hard no is, you know what? I'd rather sit in the back. That's the truth. I would rather sit in the back and look out the window and read a book or take a nap than sit in the passenger seat next to anybody, because in the back, I can't see what's happening. So ignorance is bliss, my friends. Try it sometimes. The next threshold that I want to talk about is my no room for compromise threshold. And this is from a lifetime, again, of people pleasing, but more recently from divorce, from getting divorced, from having to uproot my life and to move, not once, but twice, to have to move my son, to have to rework my entire life. And I did all of that in the name of no longer compromising on the things that I want. Now, the difficult thing about relationships, and I'm not here to shit on my divorce. Divorce is shitty. I don't care how good your divorce was. It's shitty. And when you're in a relationship, the thing that I have come to understand and I have been working on is that relationships mean compromise. And unfortunately, I'm not great at compromising. And it shows, because one of my values is, yeah, you know what? If it's not a hell yes, it's a hard fucking no. And if I gotta live in the gray, well, you're gonna hear about it, because that's not how I want to live my life, right? If you gotta put me in the passenger seat, it's not gonna be fun for you. You should just put me right in the back, or you should just let me drive. And I don't care what any of that says about control. What I'm telling you is I know myself enough to know that if I have to start compromising, or I have to continue to compromise, one or both of us is going to be very, very upset because that is not how I want to live my life. Now, what this means for me is that it is difficult sometimes for people to understand where I'm coming from, and that's okay because I don't have to explain it to anybody, but I do have to understand it myself. I don't have to try to make it make sense to other people, but it does have to make sense to me because I'm the one that has to live with it, and I have to understand that when you don't compromise in certain areas of your life, that it is going to cost you in other ways. And so for me, the value of I am not compromising, or I'm compromising as little as possible, because yeah, there's gray areas in all of this, but I am not compromising just to make someone else feel comfortable, just so that they don't feel awkward, just so that they don't have to feel bad, because I felt uncomfortable. I felt bad. I wasn't getting what I wanted for a really long time. And when I woke up to that fact, it became very difficult for me to give someone else the floor because I was trying to take back some of that control. And in fact, it is not about control. It is about discernment. If what is happening around me or to me or for me, pick your preposition, if it is draining me, I don't want it in my life. I don't want it. So we'll go back to the example of the television. If I'm sitting in front of the TV and I am feeling like this is the bare minimum, this is all I've got, I get frustrated with myself because that is not how I want to live. And I try to pay attention to what is on the television and I try to get into whatever I'm watching, but like I actually don't give a fuck. There's something else going on. And so now what I realize is that when I'm doing that, that's a trigger for me. And I realize that the compromise here is that maybe I have low energy, so I can't go all out today, but I really don't want to sit in front of the TV. And so when I'm doing that, and when I recognize that I'm doing that, I can just get up and I can change it for the most part because I recognize that that's not how I want to spend my time. And to me, that is a shitty compromise because I can be a vegetable in bed reading a book. I don't have to be rotting on the couch watching television. The neutral state threshold, this is a new one for me. I've recently discovered this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, even though I probably have no advice to give you on it other than like, try it. try not going through the motions, as people say. So I was diagnosed with ADHD when my son was 2 years old. The diagnosis was, for lack of a better description, forced on me by a doctor I was working for. Save that story for another day, but I have had ADHD long before it was trendy and long before it was running on the Instagrams about what to watch out for. I fucking knew I had it and I did nothing about it because I didn't want to take medicine for it. I didn't want to have to medicate myself. What I did instead over the years was I learned about my brain and I learned how to let go of the things that I couldn't control and focus on the things that I could. I did a lot of self-help and improvement work around just not worrying about if I'm not good at cleaning my house. As I mentioned in another episode, I hired a house cleaner. I have what I describe as constructed a Lego world for myself where my brain operates at its full capacity and I don't have to struggle with the world around me because I'm not living in that world. I'm living in my own world. And as a result of that, I've been able to create what I call a neutral state for myself, where I have lots of things that I love in my world, and I'm doing the things I want in my world. And yeah, I'm paying my bills and like paying my taxes and dealing with all the assholes and the fucking noise from the neighbor's barn and all that kind of stuff. All those things happen to me too. But I wonder sometimes as I've been getting older about, why I am so hyper aware of who I am and what I want. And when you have ADHD, you don't ever feel like you get to this neutral state. And I have been working towards this neutral state for a while where I can see that I am intentionally doing something and I'm no longer going through the motions. And there's my trigger. If I catch myself going through the motions, then I know I need to do some work to either neutralize my excitement and anxiety, or I need to ramp it up. So I need to either be more aware of something that's like a threat, so my anxiety is is ratcheting up, or I need to get more excited about something so I can get it done. And I know I have control over that now. My emotions don't run wild on me anymore. I've done lots of work to make sure that that doesn't happen. And to be clear, I still make shitty fucking decisions all the time, but I can feel good about the ones that I do make, whether they are good or bad, because I'm paying attention to what happened when I was making that decision. How was I feeling in my body? Was I in a neutral state, or was it fight or flight? Like, I'm paying attention to all that stuff. And so for me, one of the thresholds that I have is the value of having a neutral state of mind is very difficult to achieve, but I do get there. It's not about the value. It's not about like having that as a value, like, oh, I only operate in this function. But it's about understanding that I can control how I feel. And so really what we're talking about with the neutral state here is that, does my body think this is a good idea? And so the value is paying attention to the emotions that I have. When we talk about no room for compromise, we talk about that feeling of uncomfortable or comfortableness. And the value there is, well, I actually want to feel comfortable in my own goddamn house and in my own goddamn life. That is my value. No room for compromise is how I achieve that value. That's where that threshold comes from. Okay. Another threshold that I have that allows me to live what I would consider my best life is the autonomy threshold. And this is a good one-for-one example of how I value autonomy. Therefore, I have autonomy thresholds. Okay. I don't think it needs a lot of explanation past that, but basically this is freedom. And this goes back to when I would say to myself, I don't like the way these people are running this company. If I ran this company, well, you know what? Maybe I should run a company. How would I do it? Fuck if I know, but I'm going to find out. Oh, this is how I do it. Oh, okay. It turns out I do it really different than a lot of other people, which makes for very interesting conversation. And not just with my career do I want autonomy, but I want autonomy in my decision making. I want autonomy in how I decorate my house. I want autonomy in what car I drive. I want autonomy with my time. And this brings me back to the compromise threshold, my value of not having to compromise so that I don't feel uncomfortable. Again, makes it a little difficult in relationships sometimes when you're like, here is my life, and I don't know that I want to share or compromise on any of it, because that takes away my autonomy. One of the things that I think about often, and even more so as I'm getting older, is the fact that we have one life, and I think that's a fact. I don't know that that's up for debate, but you believe whatever you believe. I think I have this one life. And I have had this burning story, which I don't think is a poor me story at all. I have used it to my advantage for years, and I've really thought about it over and over again as a value, a set of values that I use as a lens to help me maintain my autonomy or control over my life. And not control in the negative sense, but just that, like, I'm in charge, I'm large and in charge. Okay. I constantly have this thought of hard work does kill people. Because when I was 8 years old, my father died of a heart attack. He was at work and he dropped dead of a heart attack. And the reason that my brain created this story, like burned it into my brain at 8 years old, the reason it created this story that hard work kills people is because my dad was working an overtime shift in the mine. He was a coal miner. I live in a coal mining town, or I used to live in a coal mining town. Now it's just a town. And he died working an overtime shift. And my little 8-year-old brain went, well, he was working too hard. Or I heard someone say, well, he was working too hard. Or he should have come home. Or whatever. Whatever, it happened. We can't change it. But I heard that and my body went, I will never put up with that. I'm going to die someday. I don't need to put up with that. I am going to maintain autonomy over my life so that when I drop dead, whether it's of my own accord or not, my own stupidity or not, I will die knowing that I did this my way, just like the song says. So I developed a story in my brain about never working myself to death for anyone, or ever giving away too much of my life to anyone because it's my life and I get this one life. And I know that sounds really combative, but it has served me in a way that is almost difficult to describe because it's tiny little movements and perceptions and lenses and decisions and ideas and sparks where I'm like, no, I mean, what if I died doing this? Would I be okay with that? And I don't even have to ask that question most of the time because if I recognize that I'm starting to ask that question, that's the trigger. That's how I know I don't actually want to do this thing. So usually, for some context, how that happens is I'm operating in someone else's system. I'm working to make someone else happy. I'm striving to serve somebody else in a way that doesn't make me feel good. And this shows up in all kinds of ways, in particular in my career. That if I don't like the work I'm doing, well, I'm probably not going to keep doing it very long because in my brain, if I don't like it, it becomes hard for me to want to do it. And hard work kills people. And that's how I got to that thought. Let's talk about the expiry date threshold. And I don't mean expiry like death. I'm talking about someone who's got ADHD. Hi, it's me. I don't glorify having ADHD ever, and I don't use it as an excuse. You will notice this about me, that I have turned my ADHD into my fucking superpower. And you will never find me saying, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but you'll never find me saying, oh, that's because I have ADHD, wah wah. What you'll hear me saying is, oh, that's my ADHD kicking into gear. And I'm off on a fucking tangent because I've got this hyper-focused piece going on, or I've got this idea, or I want to get this thing done. I have really flipped the script on ADHD in my life where I don't care if you think it's affecting my life. I know it's not affecting my life. I have so much executive function. I should be studied. For someone who has diagnosed ADHD, executive function is not my problem. My problem is hyper-focus. And that's about as far as that problem goes because I no longer accept it as a problem. I have created this entire life that I have up to and including this moment where I'm sitting here recording a podcast that doesn't make me any money on a Tuesday morning in September. And my house cleaner's on the way to clean my house for me because I have ADHD, not in spite of. So you'll never hear me say that, okay? Just a little tangent there. But I do have this thing that I consider expiry date, where when I'm thinking of seasons, and this is something that I hate this cliche, but it fits, so I'm going to use it. The expiry date threshold that I operate under, or within, is directly tied to my ADHD because I know that even if I have hyperfocus, I still may lose interest. And if I lose interest, well, we're all screwed. If something can maintain my interest and it can challenge me and it helps me create opportunities for learning, and if I'm dead set on figuring it out, then we are all winning. And I've known this for a long time about myself. I used to use it against myself when I was younger. Oh, I can't finish anything. And now I know, like, nah, fuck, I just don't want to do this. And I'm old enough and wise enough to know that, like, yeah, that's not ADHD. That's just like, this is stupid. I don't want to do it. So if I lose interest in something, it's dead in the water. And while I realize that some people still might look at this and think, oh, you know, you're just flighty. Like, fuck off. I'm not. I'm discerning. I have disinterest in things just like everyone else. Not everything is related to ADHD. Sometimes we just don't like what we're doing. And so I think of expiry dates. Other people think of seasons. I think of expiry dates because I think seasons are cyclical and expiry dates are hardcore. And this is where my ADHD gets real interesting, is that when I have decided I'm no longer interested in something, it is very rare that I will come back to it. It becomes like I have forgotten it even existed. And this is where my life is interesting in the sense that I have forgotten more than I have remembered because I do something, decide I don't like it, and I move on. And I don't ever think about it again. And so that's why I call it an expiry date. Some people call it seasons. So we do this with everything, right? Marriages, we stay longer in marriages than we should. We keep jobs longer than we should. We put up with our crazy in-laws longer than we should. We avoid telling our cranky neighbor to fuck off much longer than we should. And so really, when we understand that something doesn't serve us anymore, we're apt to call it a season. Okay, well, I'm just in this season of life. And yeah, I recorded my very first podcast. It was called Seasons of Change. But also, it could have been called, and the milk has gone bad. Because we've moved on from something, all right? We have made a very conscious decision of change. We are moving into this change. It's also that, for me, the expiry date is like hard and fast. Okay, we're probably not coming back to this. Whereas the seasons are, well, maybe I'll have another season of this, or maybe there'll be another season of that. So whatever language you like, it doesn't matter to me. I just wanted to show you the contrast of the two and why using the term expiry date serves me in a lot of ways. So we all make decisions that serve us, but sometimes we're too busy trying to make sure that everyone else around us is comfortable first. And so we don't quit doing the things we should quit doing because we don't want to upset the masses or the two people in our lives who are going to give shit that we quit our job, whatever that is. And so when I have been engaging in this creative sabbatical, if I want to do something and I'm not hurting anyone, or I'm not breaking anything, or I'm not breaking any laws, I'm going to do it. And if it doesn't feel good tomorrow, I'm not going to do it again tomorrow. And that's the expiry date. And what that means is, this goes back to my values of autonomy, of freedom, of flexibility, of being able to control the things I want to control in my life and have the final say. I don't want to feel that sense of obligation. All of this goes back to this idea that, like, I just want to live a life that is fully my own. And be honest about what that looks like. And so the last value that I want to talk about, the last threshold, is the minimum energy threshold. And this one is super interesting to me because we're going back to the example of television, okay? I mentioned twice now that I really don't like sitting in front of the TV. It sucks the life out of me in a way that, like, makes me feel kind of gross. And it's important for me to be able to identify activities that light me up and activities that lay me out. And it might not seem like a big deal, especially if you're like, oh, I have like 40 shows on the go. I love watching TV. That's great for you. I know this about myself, that after I watch TV, I don't feel great. And I have to be much more deliberate about how I spend my time so that I do feel great, because I want to feel good. I don't have to feel good all the time, but I want to work towards feeling good, because when I feel good, I can live the life I want to live. When I feel shitty, what am I doing? Full circle moment here, folks. I'm back on the couch watching TV. So I think one of the most important and impactful decisions we can make is how we spend our time. If we're just going through the motions, we're going to feel drained. If we're doing something that creates meaning and purpose, we're going to feel fulfilled. And so one of my values is to feel fulfilled, not just the avoidance of feeling drained, but to actually feel fulfilled. And as I've gotten to know myself on a deeper level over the last couple of months and years, I've come to realize that there are only a few things that really do bring me joy. And if it doesn't bring me joy, as we love to say, then I just don't make enough time for it. I don't leave enough room in my life for those things. So I want to end this episode by asking you to think about your core values, these values that you are using as an operating system in your life to help you make decisions. And what this boils down to is one thing. What do you want? Not what do I want from you, not what does your husband or wife want from you, not what do your children want from you, not what does your boss or your clients want from you. What do you want? And if you can answer that question, even with a modicum of honesty, you're going to be able to start making better decisions. So do you need a money threshold? No. But you probably want some version of freedom and flexibility in your life. So ask yourself, do I have some version of freedom and flexibility in my life? You probably don't need to have a hell yes threshold, but you do need to have some way of questioning, do I really want to do this? You probably don't need to have room for compromise or no room for compromise as a threshold, but you need to ask yourself, what is my bare minimum? Maybe you don't need to have a neutral state threshold, but you do need to ask yourself, what is my body doing when I'm making these decisions? You might not need to have an autonomy threshold, but you need to ask yourself, how is it that I want to live for myself? And maybe you don't need to have an expiry date threshold, but you do need to ask yourself, at this point in my life, how is this measuring up? How is this making me move towards the life that I really want? And you might not need to have a minimum energy threshold, but you do need to pay attention to what is sucking the life out of you and find ways to do less of that. When you find your way to your values in any shape or form, whether you use this threshold method or whether you write down your core values or whether you write down a set of questions that you like to ask yourself, there is this idea that you have to give to others before you give to yourself. And I've been so thankful over the last few years when the conversation has turned towards serving ourselves first so that we can be better versions for other people. And this idea that, we're filling up our own cups first. I love that. I have like 17 fucking cups. Okay. And they are in various states of filled all the time. And I don't know that I want to have more or less cups. It's just, this is where I'm at right now. And I definitely have a cup for every single one of these thresholds because I'm always paying attention to these things, especially right now, especially as I'm in this quote season of change. I'm in this place where things are expiring and I'm not picking them back up, or other things are just starting to turn a little curdled and maybe I can add some vinegar to it and turn it into some cheese. I have no idea. So I want you to think for yourself, what core values matter to me? And they do not have to be the same as mine. And some of them may be the same or similar, but they don't have to be. Use it as a guide. Use it to help yourself make decisions about what you want, what your thresholds are, what's important to you. But most importantly, what you don't want in your life can be filtered out very quickly. So if you need to start anywhere because it seems too big or too difficult to start with the absolutes, start with the stuff you don't like and take some time to reflect. And know this, if you discover anything new about yourself while you're doing this, that's okay. And you don't have to do anything with it right now. You can just let it sit. You don't got to upend your whole fucking life just because I told you need a money threshold. I didn't say you need a money threshold. I said I need a money threshold. So pay attention to what you want to get out of this. Take what you need, leave the rest. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you soon.